Hello, everybody. This is Paul Speciale. I'm the CMO at Scality. And as usual for our podcast, I'm joined today by Giorgio, our CTO and founder. Hi, Giorgio.
Hey, Paul. Hi, everybody.
So today we're going to talk about a very pertinent use case for IT and for businesses everywhere today, and that is backup. And we really want to talk about how object storage is really ideal in its capabilities to solve the challenges that we see today. So let's dive right in. I think one of the things you and I have seen now over the last 10 and even 20 years is that there's been a lot of changes in backup storage, right? You certainly remember the rise of companies like Data Domain saying no more tape. And that's been almost
Yep.
20 years, right? And wouldn't we agree that this was a move based on the need to improve the backup speed? That was really the need, right, at that time.
Also, I think people understood that the restore speed was the most important thing. So, if you have all this data stored in your tape and it takes you that long, like days to restore, then you
Yeah.
haven't really solved the problem. So, this gives you more warm access to your data.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I remember at the time this was the internet and cloud services rising, and people were like, wow, now we have to do 24/7 business.
Yeah.
So backup windows were small, but you're right. Disk-based backup promises a whole bunch of benefits, right?
Yeah.
Then,
And, it's pretty interesting because when it went to cloud,
Mhm,
it was file by file, Remember
right,
when people started using Dropbox and Box,
I remember.
which gives you the ultimate speed of restore because you can just restore one file, if you need it,
Mhm,
but it doesn't give you a consistent view. So, you had
yeah,
to mix both. So the full backup, the incremental backup with the standard backup software and the Dropbox and Box so that user can do self restore,
yeah,
and not have
indeed.
to get to IT.
Yeah, you can't get the point in time
Yeah.
aspect, right, by the file by file. Well, what about dedupe, right? I mean, they started realizing that backup storage space utilization could be more efficient. So this was also the rise of dedupe, I would say.
And also this comes with the rise of virtual machines.
Hmm.
And the virtual machines always kind of start from the same base. You do a one image, a standard image, gold image for your Windows deployment across the company. And as you have it deployed over multiple laptops or VMs, actually it's the same data, but you keep
Yeah.
cloning. So having the backup appliances for dedupe made it much more efficient.
Yeah, indeed. I look at this as one of the big trends that happened in storage overall and certainly in backup. But we got to say now there's a whole new dominant force, right? And it's a pretty scary one. And
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you kind of talk about what it is, right? So let's go to the next slide. It's
Yeah, so
ransom.
the ransomware, they completely changes the backup industry like overnight.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember, I'm thinking back now to all these notable events, but there's been some big ones, huh? And this is starting to cost people millions of dollars. Do you remember this one going back called AIDS Trojan? I didn't even remember it was in the 80s, but it's really risen rapidly since then.
Yeah. So it went from if I get hacked, uh, maybe they're going to install some software that's going to mine something or is going to do something, block my access,
Yep.
to this virus is now deleting my data.
Right.
But
Right.
that's a big, big shift.
Yeah. And there's so many different attack vectors, but now it seems to be an organized crime kind of
Yeah.
endeavor, right? There's these ransomware gangs, they're very smart, they hire coders, so they know how to go get our data, right?
Yeah.
So protecting
And
the
I don't know if you remember on LinkedIn, it went viral maybe 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Interpol arrested the leaders of whatever crypto gang,
Yep,
and the impact was nothing because you kill one and 10 over get
they pop
started,
up.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it felt like a good news for the industry, and it didn't change anything.
Right. It is like a crime syndicate that is very hard to squash, right? And
Yeah.
there's like nation state actors and all of that. But the point of it is it changes everything in terms of backup. We really have to have more defenses now against all of this, right? So let's kind of talk about that. So what are the ways that you think object storage can fight better or help against the fight against ransomware?
Yeah. So I think one big thing was inspired from CDs and media you can only write once,
Right.
which is immutability. So if you guarantee that the data cannot change after it's being stored, that's a big level of protection.
Indeed.
And object storage can give you that because there's protocol extension that gives
Mhm.
you what we call object lock, which guarantee that the data cannot change uh, in the background.
Right.
Then security, file system gives you a very basic level of security and access control, where
Hmm.
the object gives you policies and advanced security policies that gives you much more control of who can do what and when, right?
Agreed.
Then the suite of restore. Object storage are highly parallel platforms.
Hmm.
When you restore to thousands of VMware cluster running your applications, with object store you can restore in parallel as opposed to doing a few machines at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. These are all very powerful. And you said, the original sort of worm media, DVDs and optical media.
Yeah.
Do you remember that there was content address storage, or CAS, came along, which is really a form of
Yeah.
object storage as well, right?
Yeah. The issue with CAS was that it would fingerprint an entire object.
Hmm.
And we know that it's actually pieces of the object that changes. So it wasn't fine-grained enough to be useful.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. It had some applications in like medical imaging, but beyond that, you're right. We needed something
Yeah.
more granular. Well, it's very interesting, right? Because now looking back 10, 15 years ago, we went from the original killer feature of object storage being scale, right? You remember these days, right? We all expected and saw petabytes and then exabytes, and then people were predicting zettabytes of data. And certainly the old gen of storage wasn't designed to scale to this level, right?
Yeah. And object storage key feature was that the location of the object has nothing to do, the physical location has nothing to do with the address of the object.
Mhm.
Where in a file system, the path is where the data is being stored, right?
Right, right.
And this virtual mapping forces every object storage vendor to have a metadata engine.
Hmm.
And the metadata engine unlock the possibility of object lock, immutability, and the security, because we had to keep track of everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Like in a file system, I have to remember where I parked my car among a billion cars. And
Yeah.
that's a hard one. Right? Indeed. Well, let's talk about it a little bit more in practice. And I think, we're an object storage vendor, so we can certainly talk about our own product. Immutability and security in our own products, right? And Artesca is the product that we offer here. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the immutability aspect, and then we can talk about the resiliency or security as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the way we look at things, and I'm sure you have a better pitch than me on this, is we look at all the different ways that the system has to be secure. It's not just one
That's
way.
right.
It's not just the API. We talk about object lock, but also at the data level. How do I make sure that if I send bits back to the application, they are the one that actually were stored? So there's a lot of checksumming algorithms to do that. Then you need to make multiple copies. We need to do it in a smart way. Make sure that they're on different disks, on different servers, different data centers if need be.
Yep.
That's the geographical level. And then we have to design an architecture that's foolproof, right?
Right. Right.
And that's what we kind of try to do with Core 5. You want to give more color
Yeah,
to it?
yeah, absolutely. In fact, I present this a lot, right? And people talk about sort of in the data path attacks, as you said,
Yep.
overwrites, deletes, encryption of files or objects. But what about attacks on the soft targets, the humans, the admins, right?
Yep.
You want to make sure that they're authenticated, that they have policies for access control. And then you do hear about these sort of low-level attacks on the OS, right? So we go to the level of even security hardening the OS. So you can't log in as root. You can't have a root user do the damage. We reduce the footprint of the OS so that there's fewer sort of exposures or
Yeah.
vulnerabilities, right? So it's thinking about it a little bit more comprehensively.
Remember this week we had this product strategy meeting, and Erwan, our CPO, told us, that no security system has ever been hacked.
Yep, that's right.
And that's like we have tens of thousands of servers deployed. So I was kind of proud of hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good to hear that, and it's confidence inspiring. And I think we can say with object storage, there's a whole different paradigm, right? It's more of a get put semantic than editing a file system in place, right? File systems are intrinsically mutable. Isn't that a fair statement? You can edit
Yes.
in place, right?
Yes.
So it changes the nature of how an attacker would even have to think about it. All right, so it's highly immutable, it's secure. Now we have to talk about restore performance, right? Because yes, backup windows and restoring fast was important 20 years ago, but now it's super important, right? Don't we really have to think primarily about restore performance as fast as possible after such an event?
Yes, but also the metric should be something that the user is actually useful to them.
Right.
So I like the metric of virtual machine per hour, but something that is tangible as opposed to saying how many bytes we can send on the network.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. The more we talk to people at Veeam and their customers, their lingo absolutely seems to be VMs per day or VMs per hour, right?
Yeah.
Doing it in parallel, you already talked about. And one thing that object storage could not do in the past, but now it can, is instant recovery, right? Sort of this idea that you can mount the backup and go quickly and run off of the backup.
Yep.
So that's something we should talk about as well. So in practice, what it means to be fast is that, systems, for example, should be able to achieve performance tier tests. Veeam now primarily supports object storage at every tier. They have a performance tier, a capacity tier, and a long-term tier. For the performance tier, they have a set of performance tests that you have to meet, and that includes that they can validate your instant recovery. We actually provide some numbers here of our system on hybrid storage. So this is the key thing. This isn't even performance on all flash servers. And as we said, thinking about things as VMs restored per day, we're talking 1,000 VMs per day. These are 300 gigabyte average VM sizes. So for a mid-sized business, I'm sure that that's sufficient, right? And that would get them up and running, if not in under a day. All right. So I think it's all good stuff. We need immutability. We need cyber resiliency. We need accelerated restores. Object storage can do it today. And certainly we have some ammunition to back that up. For people that are interested in more information, if you're just learning about immutability, there's a lot out there. I did some searching, but go to TechTarget. They have all kinds of good info, definitions, and other content that you can read. We ourselves wrote a blog on, is your storage truly immutable? We think there are degrees of that. Object storage is very hardened, very immutable. And then if you're interested in more information on our product, specifically Artesca, I give you a pointer here to our page that talks all about it. Okay, it's storage really built for backup. So with that, thanks again for the chat, Giorgio. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, see you next week.
Bye-bye.